My name is Samantha Goodman, and I got a chance to interview Miss Hannah Deutch. Oh. Can anyone hear me now?
Can everybody hear us now?
Okay. My name is Samantha Goodman, and I got a chance to interview Miss Hannah Deutch, and I decided to write a paper on what I learned. When I first learned about the Holocaust and the Nazi regime in elementary school, I remember desperately trying to cover my ears. I also remember taking the bathroom pass whenever our teacher would get too detailed about her lecture, and always take my time going to and returning from the restroom. If I was lucky, I would have missed most of the lecture. At that time, and even now, it was hard for me to hear that one person could treat another person as if they were not even a person at all. And hearing about people killing other people in so many numbers just seemed like the worst act anyone could do. And I did not want to know anything about it. But eventually I did have to. And once I started middle school, and then again in high school, I did have to learn. With that, I was sure I had heard everything there was to know about the Holocaust, after all the history lessons, research papers, homework, and even movies we had to watch on the topic. However, that was until I heard about this internship at the Harriet and Kenneth Cooperberg Holocaust Research Center. Here, I would actually get a chance to get a more in-depth lesson about the Holocaust and its surrounding issues. At the end of the lessons, I would have the pleasure to interview a survivor from those times, Miss Hannah Deutch. When Dr. Flew gave me a brief summary of Miss Deutsch's experience in Nazi Germany, I was surprised she did not have to go into hiding or to a camp. From what I had learned way back in my elementary school, middle school, and high school days, ending up in a concentration camp or going to hiding seemed like the only fate a non-Aryan could meet. So I was genuinely intrigued by Miss Deutsch's experience with the Kindertransport. The Kindertransport, or otherwise known as the Refugee Children Movement, was a rescue mission for Jewish children. It was finally approved by the British Parliament a few days after Kristallnacht, or the Kristallnight in English. The Kristallnacht was an anti-Semitic riot in which 91 Jews were murdered and 25,000 to 30,000 were arrested and placed in concentration camps. 267 synagogues were destroyed and thousands of homes and businesses were ransacked. Miss Deutch told me of a memory of the night of Kristallnacht where she woke up feeling as if it was an earthquake. She wanted to look out of her window to see what was going on, but her mother forbade her since the sight of the burning synagogue was much too horrific. Unfortunately and surprisingly, Kristallnacht only caused outrage to very few countries, with the United Kingdom being one of them. The British Jewish Refugee Committee, as well as some advocates and sympathizers, which included non-Jewish denominations like Christians and Quakers, finally got British Parliament to approve the Kindertransport. This rescue mission had the United Kingdom temporarily take in about 10,000 children. With the most of them being Jewish, the kids were rescued and relocated from Nazi Germany and occupied territories of Czechoslovakia, Poland, and the Free City of Danzig. The ages allowed on this transport ranged from infants to teenagers at 17 years of age. Miss Deutch and a lot of other children arrived from Germany to England on February 2nd, 1939. From here, the children were sent to foster homes, hostels, or farms. If a child was over 14 years old, they were put into training and immediately put into labor force where they would go into agriculture or domestic services. However, if a child was over 14 years old and sponsored, he or she would go to a foster care or boarding school. For Miss Deutch, she was sent to train to become a registered nurse and worked in a hospital. However, because of the war, there was a scare that caused many refugees like Miss Deutch to be evacuated to the Isle of Man. It was a long, sickening trip on a tugboat, but they were able to avoid the bombings that occurred in the UK. Some refugees were sent to Canada and Australia as well. However, some of the refugees were unfortunate and killed when a German U-boat sank one of their boats. About 600 people were killed out of 1,200 refugees on the boat. At the Isle of Man, the refugees lived in hostels where they were supplied with food from the government. Also there, Miss Deutch continued to work as a nurse and was fortunate to be reunited with her old governess. Later, when it was safe to return to England, she went back to Manchester. Like many of the other children, Miss Deutch joined the Army later on in hopes to pay back England and get back at Germany. In the Army, although she wasn't able to work as a registered nurse at first, She cooked and tended to Army officials. Later, she defiantly gave the officer in charge an ultimatum to either make her a registered nurse in the Army or just let her return to England to work as a registered nurse there. Thankfully, they let her work as a nurse in the Army, and she was sent to training in Lancaster. Later, she was then transferred to Suffolk near Cambridge, where she finally went to Wales to care for soldiers. She remained there working in the Army until she got married. And according to Miss Deutch, the number of wedding guests totaled about 250, and she didn't know a single person. Most of them were invited from the Canadian HQ, where she had asked permission to get married to her husband. The only thing they asked from return was to be invited and throw their mitzvah, or a very large celebration party. She had her honeymoon in London and moved to Canada later on when she lived with her husband's family to raise her own children. I'm not sure who the author of this quote was, but I remember having it pop into my head when I was researching the kinder transport. In the darkest hour, there may be light. That's what the kinder transport seemed to be like to many children and parents during the war and the Nazi regime. After the kinder transport was created, the British Prime Minister, Samuel Har would agree with me and is quoted saying, "Here's a chance of taking a young generation of great people. Here's a chance of mitigating to some extent the terrible suffering of their parents and their friends." Even though few were able to reunite with their families afterwards, like many others like Miss Deutch were not able to. It is difficult and impossible to imagine how they felt after realizing they may never see their family again. But it's wonderful to find out that many, like Miss Deutch, got married and had families of their own after the entire ordeal. I think it is safe to say that many were thankful for their kinder transport, just knowing that there are some numbers of people out there in the world, then and now, who are willing to help others in need, like those in Nazi Germany and similar places, lets me know that no one should turn a blind eye to terrible events going on in the world today, especially when you have a chance to at least save a few people or get rid of some of the dangers they face.
Hannah, would you like to say something?
After I spoke with Samantha, we had time, and I showed her part of my Shoah film, and I think a lot of information came from there too, because I really didn't expand that far. What I want to tell you, survivors. I belong to a women's survivor organization. We have a meeting every month except for January and February. And the meeting consists of about 200 to 250 people. And if you would join us, I'm sure you would find somebody from your hometown there, because the whole world is there. In Manhattan as well as in Queens, yes. And I also know you. Right. What I've been doing since what happened, I've been speaking in all the schools and organizations and everywhere. I've been called back 3 times to Germany to speak in schools there. So it is very, very important that we speak. I speak on behalf of Kindertransport because that's what I came with. It was really heart-rending because at the time I was 16 years old, so I wasn't a child that didn't know anything. I was a teenager, but teenagers at the time were not like the teenagers of today. We were very sheltered and we didn't know very little. And but this much I knew. The Hitler era, for me, was my second tragedy. My father died suddenly within 48 hours in a flu epidemic when I was 7 years old. My grandmother raised me, and standing on the platform in the station, I thought to myself, I will never see my grandmother, my mother, my aunts, or anybody else again. because I knew that much what was going on from personal experience in my hometown with friends that I had gone to school with, that I had played with, that I had studied with, who told me they could not be friends anymore. So I kept myself together, but once I was on the train, I broke down. I survived. The committee really was my whole life, because they were the ones that placed me in a hospital to train as a nurse after I had gone through examinations that I was able to go into training, because our education in Germany was very good. The part where you say I went to the Isle of Man, I did, but it had a different step. All of us refugees, or anyone who wasn't a British subject, had to go to a tribunal. And the hospital where I was learning was evacuated like everybody else and everything else out of London. And we were evacuated to the seaside, and the seaside became a protected area. So that's why I was interned on the Isle of Man. It really, for me, it was a blessing, because I was kept out of a period of bombing of London, which was very bad for everybody else. But then when they released me, they said I couldn't go back to London. So I had to go to Manchester. And in Manchester, I sat for my exams for my registered nurse. And then I joined the army to fight the enemy. So things from the army, doesn't belong in here. But you don't forget. I say I'm like a cat with 9 lives. I've been so many things that I'm surviving, and I will survive. And as long as I stay healthy, I keep very, very active. And I think that is for us to do. That's what keeps us going, keeps us speaking. I can't understand parents, well, maybe I can, who cannot talk to children, to their own children, what they went through. Unfortunately, mentally, they never got over the hill. I thank you, Samantha, for bringing my life to life.